Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing!
Oh man, I've been wanting to talk about this one for ages. This is Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing, a 2010 kart racing game developed by Sumo Digital and published by Sega. This game was released on the Wii, PS3, Xbox 360, the DS, on Windows, and also had its own arcade version as well. And also on mobile, but we won't talk about that one today. The version we are looking at today is actually the Xbox 360 version, which, according to the box, is titled Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing featuring Banjo Kazooie, who is quite literally one of my favourite characters in all of gaming ever. It's just a shame that this version is the nuts and bolts design of Banjo Kazooie with the nuts and bolts car. I mean, Banjo literally started in a kart racing game, Diddy Kong Racing, and then actually had his own kart racing game, Banjo Pilot. So you had two other designs you could have given him there, but no, obviously because this is the Microsoft era, we had to give him the nuts and bolts design. So I'll give it points for having Banjo in the game, but I'll also take away some points for that god-awful design. Now, it's important to note that the developers behind this game, Sumo Digital, had already become well established in the arcade racing genre before this was even released. They had worked extensively on the Outrun franchise, porting games to different platforms, but also releasing two of their own versions of the game. They had also worked on the Toka series and the GTI Club series as well. And on top of this, they'd already worked with these Sega characters before on Sega Superstars Tennis. Basically, they were just very well versed in the genre they were working with and also the characters they were working with, which is why this game has turned out so well. This game is one of the best kart racing games that is not Mario Kart. It's not so much a clone than it is a competitor. But as well as being a very competent kart racer, this game is really a love letter to all the Sega franchises. Mostly Sonic the Hedgehog, but definitely some of the lesser known ones as well. Including the Alex Kidd series, Jet Set Radio, Space Channel 5, and Billy the Hatcher. Which, unless you were a big Sega fan, I'm sure you haven't heard of half of those.
Who the fuck is that guy?
Now, the question is, what makes this game so good? And the answer to that is a little bit more complicated than you might think. So let's break it down into sections. So, first of all, let's talk about the gameplay. With a lot of kart races that aren't Mario Kart, you tend to find that controlling anyone just feels really weird and off. It does vary on which game you are playing, but a lot of these newer kind of Mario Kart clones, like the Nickelodeon races, the Shrek one, that really dodgy Family Guy one on mobile, they all just feel a bit naff to control. This, on the other hand, feels great. Drifting is tight, you don't have any issues, I rarely found myself crashing. The physics are great, no issues again. Getting that start boost at the start of the race feels just as great as it does on Mario Kart, and it's roughly the same timings, if not just a little bit different. The items, whilst not as iconic as the Nintendo counterparts, are still pretty cool. But the main difference that makes this game stand out in terms of items are the all-star moves. Now, in most kart races, if you're not having a particularly good day and you find yourself in 8th position, then the game takes pity on you and gives you something like a bullet bill or a star. But in this game, that item, or should I say move, will vary on what character you're playing as. Each character has their own unique all-star move that will cause different effects. Some will cause the screen to flip upside down, some will make you start dancing around and slow down, others produce items out of the sky to knock players off. It really varies, and they're all very cool. Well, nearly all very cool. The game will announce when someone has used an all-star move, and that particular character theme song or a variation of their theme song will play.
All-Star alert, folks! Banjo and Kazooie have the All-Star! As well as what we say here now, this here rain is Jiggy Rain! Banjo and Kazooie really getting jiggy with it now! My eyes are taking us home! Last
That remix of the Banjo Kazooie theme is just absolutely fantastic. I had absolutely no idea it existed until I played this game. Like, I've known of this game and Banjo being in it for such a long time, but I had no idea there was a remix of the theme as well. And seeing as I've just shown you guys that clip, we may as well talk about the announcer whilst we're here. The dude does have some interesting and funny things to say, but he does say those things way too much. Once you've heard him say something, maybe once or twice, that's enough, really. But if you're playing this game through to 100% completion, you're going to get sick of him. But I will hand it to them, there are some pretty funny lines of dialogue about characters, locations, and just the game in general. Anyway, back to the game itself. So it has 4 single-player modes, which are the Grand Prix, single races, mission mode, and time trials. The mission modes have you playing as pretty much every character in the game, across different maps, completing various tasks, from just winning races, to drifting a certain amount, to destroying objects, to collecting rings. There were actually some pretty creative missions in there. The difficulty of these missions and the Grand Prix, they both increase in difficulty as time goes on, but it never really becomes a challenge if you are somewhat competent at playing kart racing games. Throughout the many missions that I played, there were only a couple that I didn't get the full rating on, and that was only because I wasn't paying enough attention to what I was doing, rather than the actual game being difficult. As well as 4 single-player modes, the game also features a multiplayer mode as well. The multiplayer modes include standard races, arena, king of the hill, collect the emeralds, and capture the Chow, which is like capture the flag but with the Chows from Sonic the Hedgehog. By playing any of these game modes, you unlock a currency called Sega Miles, which basically progress you through the game, earning you licenses, but you can also spend it on stuff in the in-game shop. These include characters, new courses, and music for those courses. You could purchase characters such as Knuckles, Big the Cat, and BD Joe from Crazy Taxi from that shop, so there were some pretty good choices. Which leads us very nicely along to the next part of the game I want to talk about: the characters and the tracks. In every version of the game, there are at least 20 playable characters. All 20 of these characters are from Sega properties. Don't get me wrong, quite a large chunk of those are from the Sonic franchise, but there's a nice mix in there. There are the franchises that I mentioned earlier, as well as Crazy Taxi, Shenmue, and Virtua Fighter, as well as some even more niche games like Choo Choo Rocket, the Bonanza Bros, and Fantasy Zone, which again, I hadn't really heard of until I played this game. The game also features Sega's other more well-known franchises that are not Sonic the Hedgehog, more specifically Monkey Ball and Samba de Amigo. On the Xbox 360 and PS3 versions of the game, there were also 2 DLC characters, which were Metal Sonic and Ryo from Shenmue, but as a forklift truck for some reason. On top of this, if you were playing on the 360, you could play as your avatar, as well of course as Banjo Kazooie, and if you were playing on the Wii, you could play as your Mii. Now, Sega could have dived further into their backlog of niche games rather than including so many Sonic characters, but the Sonic characters are really what make the game sell, so. But let's talk about the courses now. A lot of the tracks in this game are Sonic the Hedgehog themed, and most of the locations of these Sonic themed levels are from Sonic Heroes. There are maps in the game based on the House of the Dead, Super Monkey Ball, and Samba de Amigo, with that one being literally my favourite track in the whole game. There are also tracks from Billy the Hatcher and Jet Set Radio here as well. However, it would have been nice to see some of the other Sega franchises that are literally in this game get their own tracks. A Crazy Taxi themed level could have been good. Knights as a character makes a cameo in the game, but a track based on that game would have been cool. Or even a Choo Choo Rocket level, really anything else would have been cool. But what we did get was very good. The track design is very good. The environments are designed really well, they hold up really well and still look great today, 14 years later. The only level I wasn't so keen on in terms of design was the Treetops Monkey Ball level, which I just found a little bit awkward to navigate. But it's still a very nice looking level, just some poor design choices. The soundtrack for this game is also very good. Now, that is probably because a lot of the songs in this game are just taken directly from the games they come from. There are some original songs for this game, but most of that is just menu and intro music and a couple for the missions. Most of it has been taken from Sonic Heroes, Sonic Adventure, Samba de Amigo, Monkey Ball, so on and so forth. It's a nice mix of newly composed music and nostalgic Sega classics. Now, in terms of Banjo being in this game, it's actually very interesting because Rare worked directly with Sumo Digital on his inclusion in the game. Both of these studios are England-based developers. Rare gave Sumo Digital access to all the assets for Banjo and designed the kart for him, although the car looks strikingly similar to something you could have made in Nuts and Bolts anyway, so I don't really know why they bothered. Whilst we're on the topic of Banjo as well, his inclusion in the game, from Microsoft's perspective, it makes sense, I get it, and he does fit the game quite well. But if you're going to include a bonus racer to try and make people buy this particular version of the game, you'd think they'd at least make the character good, stats-wise. He's just kind of average, he's no faster than anyone else, he doesn't handle any better than anyone else. In fact, he's heavier and clunkier than quite a few of the other characters. My only other real issue with this game, though, is the occasional frame rate drops. I've been playing the 360 version specifically, and for the most part it runs really well, but when there is a lot happening on screen, there are quite significant frame rate drops. It doesn't make the game unplayable by any means, but the 360 was quite a powerful console at the time and should have handled this quite easily. But to be honest, this game is very good, and those are some pretty minor gripes to have. It's a shame that the online side of things is looking pretty barren these days, because I would definitely want to 100% this game with all achievements or trophies, depending on my platform, if I could, but there are some online exclusive achievements that I feel like would probably take a while to get when the servers were busy. They would definitely take a lot longer now, when there's basically no one playing the game. The servers, from what I can tell from doing some research, are still active, but no one's playing the game in 2024. In terms of critical response to this game, reviews were pretty much positive across the board. The 360 edition has a 75 out of 100 Metacritic score, with the highest rated version of the game actually being the iOS version at 89 out of 100, but we won't count that because it wasn't actually developed by Sumo Digital. The highest version of the original release of the game was the Wii and the DS ports combined, both at 78. This game would later go on to have a sequel, Sonic and All-Stars Racing Transformed, and then would later get Team Sonic Racing in 2019. Anyway, that pretty much takes us to the end of our look at Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing. What do you guys think of this game? Did you play it? If you did, what platform did you have it on? And most importantly, did you enjoy it? Anyway, thank you very much for watching. Please don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and tap the bell for notifications on future uploads. And as always, I will see you in the next video. Bye bye.